Hey guys. Tonight we drift across ancient sands. Beneath a sky so wide it swallows even your thoughts. The stars are unusually sharp tonight. Pinpricks in the velvet dome above Persia's endless plateau. You ride along a camel caravan, slow, swaying, and a little seasick from the lurching rhythm of four oddly jointed legs. The air is dry enough to suck moisture straight from your breath, leaving your lips cracked and your nostrils lined with dust. There's the smell of something roasting, maybe lamb, maybe something more experimental, and the faint clang of bronze trinkets hanging from saddlecloths. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're settling in, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The caravan is headed toward Anshan, a city caught between the shadows of mountains and empires. You're here not for spices or trade, but for whispers. There's a name being passed from mouth to mouth in that cautious, conspiratorial way people use when the thing they're discussing might be too dangerous or too holy. The name is Cyrus, and at this point, he's not a king. He's not even a general. He's not anything yet, except, maybe, destined. You don't know that for sure, but you can feel it in the strange quiet that follows when his name is spoken. Like the desert itself is holding its breath. A few old traders claim to have seen his mother once, a noblewoman named Mandane, who vanished into the hills before giving birth. Others say she was kept hidden on purpose, her child stolen from the palace and spirited away to avoid a prophecy. The details shift with every retelling, like sand slipping through your fingers. But the story always ends the same way. A baby survives who was meant to die. That baby? He's somewhere out there now. Maybe crawling through goat dung on a hillside or gnawing on roots. But destined, so they say, to conquer empires. You shift in your saddle. Your thighs ache. Your back protests. But something makes you keep listening. Maybe it's the way the old man next to you chuckles, even though his eyes are serious. Some boys, he says, are born with swords in their shadows. You roll into a desert camp just after nightfall. Fires flicker like a constellation fallen to earth, their smoke curling up into a sky that hasn't changed since the first gods were imagined. The camels groan and settle onto their knees. You stretch your legs, pins and needles, of course, and fumble for your blanket. But no one's sleeping yet. Not while the stories are still spilling out like wine from a cracked amphora. One tale says the baby Cyrus was left on a hillside by a frightened servant under royal orders. A dream had warned King Astyages, ruler of the Medes, that his grandson would overthrow him. So like any sensible ancient king, he decided to murder the baby before that could happen. Logical, right? Except, the servant didn't do it. Couldn't do it. Some versions say it was a herdsman named Mithridates who found the child. His tiny fists clenched like he was already holding the reins of something vast. You try to imagine it, a newborn, wailing in the wind, wrapped in nothing but fate. Your own chest tightens. It's cold out here, really cold, and still, the baby didn't freeze. Maybe it was the warmth of a mother goat curled beside him. Maybe it was divine intervention. Maybe, historians still argue about this, someone in the palace meant for him to survive. You lie back on a worn rug, watching the sparks rise into the heavens. The ground is hard beneath you. The wool itches your neck. But the story keeps you awake. It's sticky and uncomfortable, like knowing a thunderstorm is coming but not when. You can't look away from it. The herdsman raised Cyrus as his own, teaching him how to drive sheep, how to read the stars, how to stay silent when men of power were near. And still, the boy stood out, too tall, too commanding. Even in childhood, he had that thing. Call it charisma, call it destiny. You've seen kids like that, right? The ones who organize games even when they're not trying to. The ones other kids follow around without knowing why. By the time he was 10, Cyrus had already gotten himself into trouble by playing king a little too seriously. He ordered other boys around, handed out punishments, sat on rocks like they were thrones. It was cute, until one of the other children turned out to be a noble's son and got a bit too bruised for comfort. Suddenly, the grown-ups were paying attention. You blink against the firelight. The smoke burns your eyes. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing in a language you don't know. But the tune makes your throat tighten. There's something heavy in the air now. The weight of a world rearranging itself. When young Cyrus is summoned to court to explain his behavior, he doesn't cower, doesn't grovel. Instead, he explains that he was simply acting as a king should. When his pretend court was unjust, he corrected it. When boys disobeyed, he punished them, not for cruelty, no, never that, but to preserve order. You'd expect a kid to cry or mumble. But this boy? He talks like someone used to being listened to. Astyages starts to sweat. The king has seen something familiar in the boy's eyes. Something frightening. And just as you start to rest, another trouble begins. The throne room smells of old cedar, goat oil, and too many secrets. You stand pressed against a carved column, barely breathing, while the boy, Cyrus, faces his grandfather, King Astyages. His tunic hangs a little crooked, the fabric scratchy like the kind you remember from summer camp bedding. But he stands straight, like he's forgotten he's supposed to be 10. Like he already knows his knees will one day be dusted with the soil of distant cities. Astyages squints, leans forward. For a moment, the old king doesn't see a child. He sees an omen, the kind that visits in dreams and refuses to leave. Like a fly buzzing against the inside of your skull. His hand trembles just slightly as he reaches for his wine cup. You hear it, the faint clink of bronze on stone, as he sets it back down harder than intended. Historians still argue whether this meeting was staged. If Astyages had already realized the truth about Cyrus's identity, maybe he'd suspected since the boy's shepherd father first appeared in court. Sweating bullets and mumbling excuses. Maybe the old king just couldn't ignore the way the child looked too noble. Too poised. Too much like someone who should be leading armies instead of herding goats. The legend says Astyages laughs. Long and hard. It's a cold sound. Sharp-edged like flint. But inside, he's not laughing at all. He's unraveling. Because this is the grandson he ordered dead. The same one now standing in his court, delivering speeches on justice and leadership. You glance at the guards. Their eyes flicker with confusion. Maybe they've realized it too. That fate, once put in motion, is like a stone rolling downhill. It doesn't stop just because you finally change your mind. Astyages doesn't kill the boy. Instead, he welcomes him, offers to raise him as royalty. But the air is tight with unspoken dread. You can smell it, like milk just about to turn sour. And that scratchy tunic? It's not going away anytime soon. Cyrus wears it back to the countryside, back to his adoptive parents. But something's changed. Everyone sees it now. He doesn't belong among sheep. You fast forward a few years, your knees ache from the ride. The sun's a ball of fire pounding the top of your skull. And your waterskin is just a sad, sloshing echo. You're traveling with Persian tribes now. They're tired of Median rule. They grumble over tax quotas, royal demands, and forced labor projects that steal their sons for palace roads they'll never walk. The rebellion starts small, quiet as a splinter slipping under skin. You see fires burning on hilltops at night, signals. You hear coded greetings. Careful glances. Old men nodding at market stalls with the solemnity of priests. Cyrus is at the center of it. Not loud, not wild, but steady. Intent. His charisma doesn't shout. It gathers. One evening, around a smoky tent hearth, you watch him speak. No throne, no robes. Just a firelight flickering over his face, making his eyes dance like a fox's in the dark. He speaks of freedom, of destiny, of how Persia is more than just a province, it's a soul. The others lean in, half awake, half dreaming. You do too. The air is so dry your lips crack. But you don't notice. The words are enough. Soon after, the revolt ignites. You're marching now. Dust in your boots. Sword rubbing raw against your hip. The terrain turns ugly, rocky ridges like broken teeth. The Medes don't take this lightly. Astyages, feeling the heat rise around his throne, sends troops to crush the rebellion. But there's a problem. His general, Harpagus, is the same man he once ordered to kill Cyrus as a baby. Yeah, that guy. Plot twist. Turns out Harpagus never forgave the king for making him feed a child's corpse to his own family. Long story. Dark story. History's weird like that. So, when Harpagus gets the order to wipe out Cyrus, he nods, then defects. Whole squadrons start, accidentally, losing battles. Rations vanish. Orders get reversed. It's not just a military blunder, it's an inside job with centuries of resentment behind it. And you're right there in the middle of it. Trudging up hills, sliding down muddy banks, clutching your ribs during night raids where the fog moves like ghost breath. Your hands are blistered, your body stings, you haven't eaten anything warm in days. But something in your chest glows every time Cyrus lifts his arm and men rally, not because they're paid to, but because they want to. Finally, you see it, the moment the median line breaks. The royal banners drop, shields scatter like beetle shells across the plain. The enemy flees, not just defeated, but undone. Cyrus enters the Median capital not as a looter, not even as a conqueror, but like someone who just came home to clean up a mess. He doesn't burn the city. He doesn't massacre the nobles. He doesn't even exile Astyages. Though you can bet that guy's dinners got way more awkward. Instead, he folds the Median Empire into his own. Smooth as butter, clever as a fox in a silk robe. You walk through the newly Persian streets, where the scent of incense wafts up from temples now flying different flags, but somehow, nothing feels wrong. It's still familiar, just, cleaner, quieter. And now you see it. This isn't the end of a war. It's the start of something massive. Persians, Medes, Elamites, Lydians, Parthians, all woven together like one enormous carpet under Cyrus's feet. A tapestry of tribes, stitched not by brute force, but by surprisingly fair tax codes and local tolerance. He lets people keep their gods, their customs, their food. Historians still argue whether that was ideology or just a smart way to avoid riots, but hey, it works. You walk the streets at night now, and they feel different. No more soldiers screaming orders. No more temple closures. Just merchants haggling, priests chanting, bakers yawning over morning ovens. The empire is breathing, but your knees still creak, and your shoulders still ache from too many sleepless nights on the road. And just as you start to dream of peace, Cyrus turns his eyes elsewhere. You wake up to a sound that feels too clean for a battlefield, like wind brushing over bronze, or the whisper of silk across polished stone. It's not war you're waking into now, it's construction. The empire is young, but it's already thinking like a grandparent, obsessed with infrastructure. Cyrus isn't sharpening swords anymore, he's sharpening borders, drawing lines, and pouring gravel into the arteries of his dominion. You ride along one of the first Persian roads, really just a trampled strip of earth with some logs at the edges, but still, it's something. Carts creak along behind you, piled with bricks, amphorae, and nervous donkeys. The sun is brutal overhead, a hammer pounding your head straight through your scarf. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, and your sandals, yeah, those are about 3 blisters past redemption. But still, it's happening. You pass workers carving canals, connets, thin miracles of underground water tunnels that keep villages alive through scorching summers. You squint down into one and catch the glitter of moving water far below. Cool as a dream, you ache to crawl down into the shade and let it run over your face. But there's no time. There's always another site to visit. Another outpost rising from dust. Everywhere you go, you hear the same thing. He doesn't rule like the others. Cyrus is building, not just conquering. He doesn't just absorb, he repairs. You pass temples of gods you don't recognize. But they're still standing. Their priests still chant. The gods, apparently, haven't been fired. And that's where the quirky part slips in. Cyrus doesn't build grand monuments to himself like other kings do. No 10-story statues with his abs on full display. His palaces? Functional. His tomb? Humble. You get the sense he's not interested in eternal glory. Only eternal function. This is a guy who'd rather design a drainage system than a golden throne. Maybe that's why he stays awake so late, sketching city layouts on clay tablets while the rest of the court is passed out on feather cushions. You feel it too, this strange sense of purpose. Like the empire isn't built to intimidate, but to work, and that's rarer than you'd think. One afternoon, as you drag your sore feet through a half-finished city that smells like mud and ambition, you notice something. People aren't scared. They're busy. That's the difference. The merchants aren't bracing for tax hikes. They're arguing over trade routes. The potters are making jars because someone actually ordered them, not because they're paying off some blood debt. The bakers are baking because people are buying. You catch yourself smiling, despite the heat in your increasingly disgusting shirt. Your knees ache, your shoulders burn, but your heart's a little lighter. And then you arrive at Ecbatana. This place used to be Median territory. The city rises like a mountain-shaped crown. All terraces and green stone. You climb endless steps, your thighs screaming, until you reach the central hall, where the floor glows like poured copper in the late sun. You expect statues, military banners, maybe a room full of scribes. Instead, you find silence and maps. Cyrus is there, of course. Quiet, thoughtful, not lounging on a throne, but kneeling on the floor with a reed stylus, adjusting a border line between Lydia and Cilicia. You clear your throat. He doesn't look up, just murmurs. It needs to make more sense for the shepherds. Yeah, the shepherds. That's who he's redrawing imperial districts for. Not the nobles, not the generals. The guys who still carry crooks and sleep under stars. You sit down. The tiles are warm under your sore thighs. You feel something shift, not just in the room, in you. Maybe empires don't always start with swords. Maybe they can start with logic. But logic doesn't mean safety. Because far to the west, across hot plains and crooked rivers, lies Babylon. Babylon, older than your grandmother's ghost stories. A city that speaks in gold and walks in pride. And it has its eye on Persia, just as Persia now eyes it back. At night, the soldiers whisper, "Will he try it? Can it be done?" You lay awake, listening to the desert wind scrape against the walls of your tent like the clawed hand of a god. You don't know the answer. Babylon isn't just another city. It's the city, a marvel, a monster. Historians still debate whether Cyrus had his eye on Babylon from the beginning. Or if it was provoked by something, maybe trade, maybe politics, maybe just that insatiable tug all empire builders feel when they see a border too neat. But here's what you do know. You're going there. You cross rivers that smell like copper and rot. Villages that greet you with curiosity instead of fear. The army swells behind you. But it's quieter than you'd expect. Cyrus doesn't whip the men into a frenzy. He talks about discipline, about patience, about how sieges are won not with rage, but with reason. And then, one hot, vibrating morning, you see it, Babylon. The towers pierce the sky like accusations. The ziggurat looms, its base wide enough to host 100 chariots. The Euphrates slices through the city like a jeweled ribbon. And the walls, oh, those walls, tall enough to blot out the horizon, thick enough to run chariot races on top. They say even gods couldn't breach them. You feel small, like an ant eyeing a cathedral. But you keep walking. You camp outside for days. Then weeks. Then, somehow, news spreads. The city gates are open. Not stormed, not battered, just unlocked. There are theories. Some say Cyrus diverted the Euphrates just enough to sneak his troops under the walls. Others claim the priests inside opened the gates, sick of their own king's arrogance. There's even talk of divine intervention, a Babylonian god defecting to Team Persia. History has room for everyone's version. You don't really care, because the result is the same. You walk into Babylon with your mouth open and your eyes watering from dust and awe. This city smells like jasmine and sewage and roasted almonds. The streets are paved, the temples glow, and no one is screaming. Not one scream. It's a conquest without blood. Or at least, without much. You pass old women selling bread, children giggling near fountains, priests offering incense to a king who didn't destroy their gods, but told them to keep praying. That's the trick. You realize, Cyrus doesn't erase, he includes. And just as you settle into the sweet-smelling shade of a Babylonian fig tree, sipping something syrupy from a cracked cup, another whisper reaches your ears, faint and strange. The Jews. They say he's going to send them home. The streets of Babylon buzz like a beehive the day before a storm. But it's not fear in the air, it's confusion. You sit on the worn edge of a fountain, ankles sore, hands sticky from some kind of honey pastry you regret finishing in 3 bites. Across the plaza, merchants unload crates of dyed wool and painted ceramics, side-eyeing every official with a new scroll under their arm. Something big is happening, something odd. You overhear it first from a grocer. He's letting them go. The Judeans, all of them. You blink. Letting people go? That's not how empires work. Empires absorb. They don't return. And yet, here you are, watching runners from the royal court distribute notices written in Aramaic, Akkadian, and Hebrew. They flutter like sleepy moths across market stalls. Cyrus has issued a decree. The Jews, exiled decades earlier by the Babylonians, are free to go home. Not just free, encouraged, funded, assisted. You scratch your head, which itches under your sweat-crusted scarf. This doesn't compute. Kings don't offer moving services to people their predecessors dragged across deserts in chains. But Cyrus does, and he doesn't stop there. He orders the return of temple treasures, golden bowls, silver censers, menorahs, that had been looted when Solomon's temple was destroyed. You imagine the caravans being prepared, the quiet weeping of elders who thought they'd die in a foreign land, the stunned disbelief in the voice of a scribe unrolling a scroll he never thought would see home again. The official reason? Cyrus claims divine instruction. He says the God of the Judeans told him to do this. Historians still argue whether he actually believed that or was just really good at PR. Either way, the result is stunning. You find yourself in a crowd outside one of the old treasuries. Thick stone walls, metal doors that hum when they open, like something too old to fully trust. Inside are rows of precious objects, stacked neatly, tagged in cuneiform like an ancient warehouse clearance sale. A priest recites each item as it passes into Jewish hands. The objects shimmer, not just with gold, but with memory. Each one tells a story of a home lost, a god questioned, a people scattered, and now, they are being carried again. Not as spoils, but as promises. You follow one family as they prepare. The father's beard is more gray than black. His hands tremble as he wraps fragile vessels in cloth. The mother doesn't speak much, just presses her palm flat against the side of each crate like she's sealing in prayers. Their youngest son is wide-eyed, asking what, Jerusalem, even looks like. He was born here, in Babylon. To him, home is just a word grown-ups whisper when they think he's not listening. That hits you deep. You help lift a bundle onto a cart. It's heavier than it looks. Feels like lifting someone else's grief and their hope all at once. The oxen groan as they're yoked. The wheels creak forward, and you realize this is actually happening. It's not just Jews in the street. Babylonian bystanders watch with curiosity. Some smirk, others nod, a few even cheer. You notice an old man in a tall red headdress quietly sketching the event into a clay tablet, already turning it into history. Night falls. You sit beneath a column carved with lion heads and stars. The stone still radiates heat from the day's sun. Someone passes around wine, sharp, tangy, a little too sour, but it does the trick. You watch the city lights glitter across the river, thinking of all the voices rising in a dozen languages behind you. One of the soldiers says something funny. He even put it on a rock. You squint. What? The decree. It's written in stone, literally, cuneiform, on a cylinder, like a message to the gods, or to archaeologists. You chuckle, but then you see it. The Cyrus cylinder. It's a short clay barrel, no longer than your forearm, but packed with dense, looping text. It sits behind a velvet rope in the temple archives, surrounded by guards who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. You lean in, squinting at the faded lines. It speaks of conquest, yes, but also restoration. It says Cyrus returned sanctuaries to their proper gods, that he respected their traditions, that he came not to destroy, but to fix what had been broken. You shiver, not from cold, from weight. This little cylinder has become a kind of PR scroll for eternity. Historians debate its spin. Of course, was Cyrus genuinely tolerant? Or just strategically so? But down here, on the dusty floor of an archive room that smells like ink and damp linen, it doesn't matter, because people believe it, and belief moves things. You step back into the street. The carts are leaving at dawn. Some have garlands tied to their sides. Others carry the sick, the elderly, the wide-eyed children who've never seen Jerusalem but dream of it anyway. The mood is strange, equal parts joy, fear, and exhaustion. You sit beside a rabbi that evening. He's scribbling on a parchment scroll, muttering psalms. You ask him how he feels. He smiles, barely, like waking from a long, heavy dream. He says, and hoping the walls are still there. You look up. Babylon's towers still gleam, aloof and indifferent, but something has cracked, not the walls, not the empire, but something older, something about what an empire could be. Cyrus isn't just a king now. He's a hinge, a turning point in the story. And just as you begin to relax, watching torches flicker along the road, a new thought tightens your chest. What happens when they actually get there? You wake before the sun. Not by choice. Your back is stiff from the packed earth. And someone's donkey keeps making noises that sound like existential despair. Around you, the caravan is already stirring. People shuffle with the hazy confusion of a dream that didn't quite end. There's the low clatter of wheels being tested, the whispered arguments over what to leave behind, and the smell, oh gods, the smell of warm dates, unwashed tunics, and nervous sweat. This is what hope looks like at 4 a.m., grimy, anxious, and still wearing the same scratchy robe as yesterday. The procession out of Babylon stretches longer than you expected. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of Judeans lining up, not as prisoners, but as pilgrims. Some sing softly, their voices trembling with the rhythm of ancient psalms. Others are quiet, as if afraid that speaking might break whatever strange spell has made this moment possible. You walk alongside them. Dust coats your sandals almost immediately, turning your feet the color of dried bone. The sun rises slowly, washing the land in a pale amber light. It's beautiful in that way deserts often are, vast and indifferent. Every step forward feels more symbolic than practical. And here's the thing. The journey back to Jerusalem? It's long. Like, this could actually kill you. Long. We're talking hundreds of miles across open desert, hostile terrain, and supply routes more wishful than guaranteed. No Ubers, no roadside motels, just heat, sand, and the lingering hope that God, or Cyrus's decree, will keep you from starving halfway there. A historian might say this was a well-organized repatriation movement. You'd call it a miracle powered by sore ankles. But despite it all, there's movement, momentum. Some families travel by cart, others on foot. Grandmothers cradle Torah scrolls in cloth like newborns. Little kids drag toys carved from olive wood, asking every 20 minutes if this is the land of milk and honey yet. You pass through tiny villages where people stare like they've seen ghosts. And maybe they have. After all, these Judeans aren't just any travelers. They're the living return of a memory thought dead. A culture back from exile. One day, you stop to help repair a broken cart. The axle's cracked, and the only spare wood available is from a ruined fence half swallowed by sand. You spend an hour wrestling it into place. Hands blistered, mouth full of dust. When it's done, the old man who owns the cart presses something into your palm. A lump of dried figs and a soft thank you in Hebrew. You don't understand the words, but the meaning hits you square in the ribs. Later, that same evening, you crest a rise and catch a glimpse of the horizon. Just a shimmer. Really, like a mirage, but the direction is right. Jerusalem lies ahead, somewhere beyond that wave of sunlit haze. The word spreads like wildfire down the line. We're close. That night, as the camp settles, the air grows cooler. Someone starts singing. Not a grand choral anthem, just a slow, cracked melody. A lullaby, maybe, or a prayer. You lie back against your pack, eyes on the stars, and feel something you haven't felt in weeks. Peace. It doesn't last long, because the next morning, the first stones come into view. Jerusalem. Sort of. What's left of it. You crest the final hill, heart thudding like a drumline, only to see ruin, ash, skeletal walls. The once grand temple is a blackened husk. Its columns half collapsed, its gates swallowed by weeds. Goats graze where altars once stood. The city smells like scorched history. You feel it like a punch to the chest. Some fall to their knees. Others just stand in stunned silence. One woman breaks down sobbing, clutching a small sack of dirt she carried from Babylon to sprinkle on her grandfather's grave. Only now she can't find the grave. You walk slowly among the ruins, your feet kicking up dust that hasn't moved in decades. The wind whistles through the broken beams like it's morning. 2. You imagine what this place once looked like: gleaming stone, polished brass, firelight from the temple reflecting off gold. Now it's a skeleton. But somehow, it's still home. The rebuilding begins with barely a plan, just stubbornness and borrowed tools. You join in, hands shaking as you hoist broken bricks, clear rubble, and re-dig a foundation stone that feels too sacred to be this buried. People argue, a lot, about which direction the temple faced, about which wall to build first, about whether it's even safe to do this, because not everyone in the surrounding lands is thrilled that the Judeans are back. And here comes your quirky tidbit. Early on, some of the temple workers wear bells on their robes. Not for fashion, for safety, in case they collapse inside the Holy of Holies. Yeah, that's a thing. They can be pulled out without others entering and accidentally angering God. The days are long, the labor mind-numbing. Your hands bleed, your back screams, and your clothes, well, let's just say you wouldn't win any fashion contests. But slowly, something takes shape. A corner wall, a gatepost, a shadow that vaguely resembles a roof. One night, a group of elders light a ceremonial fire. It crackles in the center of the old courtyard. where the altar used to stand. They offer prayers, trembling, rusty with time, but real. You sit near the edge, watching sparks rise into the black sky, and wonder what Cyrus would think if he saw this. A city reborn, not with fanfare, not with armies, but with sore hands and whispered songs. And just as you dare to believe the worst is over, someone taps your shoulder. "We have a problem," they say. You sigh, standing up slowly as your knees protest with a symphony of pops and creaks. Of course there's a problem. You follow the man through the half-built streets, past stacks of uneven stone and the burnt husks of fig trees. There's a new smell on the wind tonight, sharper than the usual mix of dust, goat, and old prayer. It smells like tension, like trouble, like someone's cooking up betrayal in a clay pot over a low flame. The problem isn't a broken wall or a cracked cistern. It's people. It's always people. Turns out not everyone is thrilled about Jerusalem rising again. Some of the locals, descendants of those who stayed behind during the exile, are suspicious. Others are outright hostile. You overhear one man muttering, "They think they can just come back and take over?" Another says, "This is our land now." A third, quieter voice adds, "They brought Persian favor with them. What happens when that favor runs out?" You stand among a half-built foundation, hand resting on a tool that still smells like new cedar, and realize the hardest part of rebuilding isn't the stone, it's the politics. There are whispers, letters sent back and forth to Persian satraps, accusations that the Judeans are plotting rebellion, that the temple isn't a holy site, it's a fortress in disguise. You know it's nonsense, but nonsense, repeated enough, becomes dangerous. One evening, after a long day of hauling water from a well that spits sand more than liquid, you sit by the fire with a group of younger workers. Someone asks if Cyrus even remembers them. "Does he know how hard it is here?" They say. "He gave us permission, but not protection." The group falls silent. The fire crackles. You feel a chill, despite the embers. And here's the quirky truth. The temple builders start assigning guards at night. Not priests, warriors. You rotate between swinging hammers and holding spears. Sleep becomes a rumor. You dream in half-thoughts and wake with your tongue glued to the roof of your mouth. Still, you build. One day, a delegation from the surrounding territories approaches the city gates. They smile too much, offer help with the reconstruction. Their robes are bright, their voices smooth, but something about them feels off, like honey left too long in the sun. The elders decline. That's when the real sabotage begins. You wake to find tools missing, supply wagons rerouted, bricks shattered in the night. You guard the city walls, blinking sleep from your eyes, watching shadows that don't belong. You hear stories of threats whispered at wells, of bribes passed in alleyways. The resistance isn't loud, it's steady, the kind that wears down resolve like water on stone. And yet, the work continues. You press one stone onto another, your palms red and raw. Next to you, a boy no older than 12 sings quietly, a verse from Psalms that barely reaches your ears over the din. You want to ask him why he's still smiling. Then you realize, it's because he's never seen Jerusalem whole. To him, even this shattered version is better than anything he's known. You look around. The elders debating blueprints with charcoal on clay shards. The mothers planting herb gardens in broken amphorae. The children tying string between posts and pretending it's a house. This isn't just a city being built, it's an identity being remembered. One night, during another watch shift, your knees aching and eyes blurring, you hear it, footsteps, but not hostile. A group of men, tall and weathered, approach the gates. They carry scrolls. One steps forward, holding it high like a torch. It's a decree, a reminder, signed by Cyrus himself. It confirms the right to rebuild. It confirms the return of treasures. It confirms that anyone opposing the Judeans is, in fact, opposing the will of the king. You let out a breath you didn't know you'd been holding since Babylon. The scroll passes from hand to hand. It smells like old ink and baked earth. Some of the workers cry. Others just nod. The letter doesn't build walls or chase away saboteurs. But it reminds everyone. You're not alone in this. And now the scholars get busy. With just parchment and memory. They start debating details. How tall should the Holy of Holies be? Which direction should it face? Was the altar square or slightly rectangular? No one agrees. But instead of violence, there are arguments. Heated ones. Passionate ones. The kind that would put your aunt's holiday dinner debates to shame. Historians later call this the beginning of Second Temple Judaism. You call it a miracle that nobody threw a tablet at anyone's head. Eventually, consensus forms, if not on every detail, at least on the essentials. The temple will rise, the traditions will return, and the people are beginning to feel something unfamiliar. Stability. You start sleeping again. Not much, but better. The goat smell never leaves, neither does the dust, but your dreams shift. Less of war, more of light, of completed walls, of a day when you can walk through the gates and smell fresh bread. Not ash. And just as you start to believe you might finally breathe easy, someone runs through the street, breathless, eyes wide. The king is dead, they whisper, and suddenly, the fire goes cold. It's strange how the world keeps spinning after a king dies. You'd expect something bigger, a storm, a quake, a trumpet blast, maybe, but no. When Cyrus the Great passes, the skies stay dry, the goats keep bleating, and your sandals still squeak in the same annoying way when you walk through temple dust. You get the news from a merchant's boy, who hears it from a traveler, who swears on his donkey grave that it's true. Cyrus fell in battle. Far to the northeast, somewhere near the steppes where maps fade into legend. The Scythians, maybe, or the Massagetae, or both. Scholars still argue about that, whether it was a tactical mistake or just bad luck. Or if, maybe, he simply pushed too far into a place that didn't want his kind of order. But the effect back home? That hits like a collapsing pillar. People don't wail in the streets. It's quieter than that, like a sudden winter. You feel it in the way conversations trail off, in how workers hammer a little slower, in how the elders glance at one another with that unspoken, "What now?" kind of look. Because Cyrus wasn't just a king. He was the king, the one who let them return, the one who respected their God, the one who left them mostly alone. And in the ancient world, that was basically sainthood. You walk the walls that night, torch in hand, and everything feels thinner, like the stone beneath your feet is suddenly unsure if it wants to hold your weight. The succession is immediate, but not smooth. His son, Cambyses II, takes the throne, and, let's just say the guy lacks his father's touch. He doesn't hate the Jews. He just doesn't care. He's busy with other things, mainly Egypt, the empire's new shiny target. You hear the armies preparing for a massive campaign. And Babylon, despite all its riches, becomes a way station rather than a center. The edicts? They stop. The scrolls? Delayed. The flow of resources? Sluggish. And the whispers start again. You're sitting in a newly rebuilt courtyard, admiring how the morning light turns chipped limestone into something almost golden. When a young man sighs beside you, it's like the gods took their eyes off us. You don't argue, because part of you wonders the same. Without Cyrus's backing, local opposition grows bolder. Some claim the temple construction violates regional boundaries. Others say it was all a scam to grab land under the guise of divine purpose. You feel the shift in the air, heavier, less forgiving. You hear it in the way officials speak to you now, polite, but clipped, less warmth, more watching. The scrolls you once guarded with pride are now handled more carefully. Not out of reverence, but suspicion. One day, you overhear a trader muttering that Cyrus's body was returned to Pasargadae. Where his tomb now stands, small, simple, alone. You've never been there, but the image won't leave your mind. A conqueror who united empires. Buried in silence under a stone house no bigger than a stable. No gold, no statues, just wind, sand, and the weight of memory. There's something poetic about it. That evening, you sit atop a wall, staring out over the hills. The horizon glows orange, then fades to ash. You feel that cold shroud again, uncertainty curling around your ribs like a sleeping snake. The temple's half done, the city's still fragile, and the king who made it all possible? Gone. You wonder what Cyrus would say. If he were here, maybe something dry and practical, like, keep building, or maybe he'd say nothing, and just point to the cracked stone. The weary hands, the singing that still happens every morning, even if it's out of tune. Because even in the silence after a great man's death, something stirs, and just as your eyes begin to close, lulled by the hum of desert wind, a rider arrives, fast, frantic, covered in dust. You sigh, stand, and stretch the knots from your spine. Of course, trouble doesn't wait for morning. The rider barely stops his horse before leaping off, legs wobbling from too many miles without rest. His cloak is stiff with sweat and sand, and his face looks like it's been scrubbed with gravel. You catch the parchment he tosses like it's on fire. And honestly, it might as well be. Because the seal isn't Persian, it's Babylonian, and it's not friendly. Apparently, Babylon is stirring again, loudly this time. Whispers of rebellion, rumors of independence, and one big, ugly claim. Cyrus is dead. The Jews are foreign loyalists, and Persia has forgotten them. You read the scroll again. Slower, the words twist like thorns. In the middle of the city, Cyrus's death was a fading ache. But out here in the political hinterlands, it's an excuse, a pivot. You feel it instantly. The empire's edges are fraying. And Jerusalem, once so far from danger it might as well have been myth, is now exposed. You don't panic, not yet. You gather the elders, the priests, the architects. You hold the parchment like it's not shaking in your hand. And for a moment, everyone just looks at one another. You're in a half-built city with no army, no clear patron, and walls that still echo when the wind gets rowdy. This isn't what you'd call defensible. Someone suggests hiding the temple treasures again. Another mentions fleeing. But then, from the back of the room, someone says it. We'll write back. A murmur of surprise. To whom? To the Persians. To the king. If he won't listen, maybe his governors will. The archives must still hold the original edict. The one from Cyrus. The law doesn't vanish just because a man dies. You'd roll your eyes if you weren't so tired. It's a long shot, but long shots are kind of your thing lately. So you write, carefully, formally, every word weighed like it's worth a handful of silver. You mention the decree, the vessels, the return, the building. You leave out the part where things are falling apart. The scroll is sent with 2 riders. Trusted and fast, they vanish into the horizon. And you're left waiting, and hoping that bureaucracy hasn't forgotten how to read. In the meantime, you keep building. You divide labor. Keep the workers busy. Keep the children distracted. Keep the prayers flowing, even when they sound more like groans. Some days are better. Some days you get an entire section of wall up. Others, you just argue about whose fault it was the cart broke a wheel. And then there's the fringe news. Strange things. In Babylon, a man has declared himself king. Claims the throne. Claims visions. Claims the gods spoke to him in dreams. You snort. Babylon's gods are always chatty when politics are involved. But then he begins threatening Judean outposts, harassing trade caravans, blocking lumber routes from Lebanon. This isn't just power play, it's strategic. You're being squeezed. One morning, the bricklayers stop working, not because they're lazy, but because no one knows what happens if this drags on. If the letters vanish into Persian vaults. If this new Babylonian king is taken seriously. You look around the worksite and see more waiting than work. More fear than faith. You wander alone for a while. Through alleys lined with chipped stone and crooked doorframes. You pass a small garden someone's been coaxing into life. Fig trees barely knee-high. Their leaves already browning in the heat. A sign someone scrawled in chalk sits nearby. Even weeds find roots. It sticks with you. That night, a scribe from the north arrives with a dusty satchel and a smile you don't quite trust. But the moment he pulls out the scroll, sealed with the king's mark, your breath catches. It's from Darius. Cambyses is gone. Died mysteriously in Egypt. Some say by his own hand. Others say poison. Scholars argue, as always. But Darius, a general with enough sense and paperwork to claim legitimacy, has taken the throne. And he, unlike Cambyses, responds. He's seen the records. He's read the archives. He confirms that Cyrus's decree was real, binding, and still in effect. You read the letter twice. Then again. Permission restored. Support re-established. Opposition is to cease immediately. Under penalty of imperial wrath. You want to shout, but instead you laugh, loud and messy and hoarse. Others join in, a sound like relief and exhaustion colliding in your chest. And here's your fringe detail of the night, buried in the scroll. A single line you almost miss. Darius not only reaffirms the decree, he adds funding. From the royal treasury, your rebuilding project is now on the empire's budget. It's hard not to smirk at that. You imagine some poor treasurer in Susa blinking in confusion, muttering, "What's a Jerusalem, and why do they need so many silver bowls?" And just as you sit down, rubbing the tired from your eyes, someone yells, breaks over, "Get your hammer." You've never seen a city move this fast. The moment Darius's decree is read aloud in the square, right beside the half-set stones and the ever-flickering altar fire, the entire mood shifts. Not just from tired to energized, but from uncertain to ravenous. The silence that had crept in during the waiting days is gone. Chased out by the clink of chisels, the groan of lifted beams, the shout of instructions yelled in 5 different dialects and understood in just enough fragments to avoid dropping a pillar on someone's foot. You jump back in. Your hands are calloused now. The hammer feels familiar. The sun still fries your neck like an overenthusiastic oven god. But you don't care. Something's flowing again. Not just water through the new aqueduct lines, but will. The people are alive again. Driven. Singing while they work. Sometimes in tune. Sometimes not. But always loud enough to scare off jackals. It's not smooth. Nothing in this place ever is. You still have arguments over temple layout. Over where the menorah should stand. Over which family's goats keep sneaking into the sacred courtyard. But now, when those arguments happen, they end with laughter or shoulder slaps. Not slamming doors and pointed stares. And then it happens. The foundation stone of the new temple, the second temple, is laid. You help set it, shoulder to shoulder with priests, laborers, kids, old women who should be resting but wouldn't miss this moment for anything. The stone is rough, uncarved, just a block pulled from the earth and polished by sweat and hope. The priests chant, trumpets blow, cracked and flat in places, but glorious all the same. People cheer, some cry, others fall to their knees, hands trembling on the ground as if the touch of this stone might carry them back to Solomon's time. And then there are the elders. You see them standing at the edge, men and women with faces like weathered parchment. Who remember the first temple? Who were small children when Babylon burned it to ash? And now they're here, watching its bones rise again. Some of them cry. But not all those tears are joy. One man turns to you, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not the same," he says. "It will never be the same." You nod, because he's right. It won't. The grandeur, the gold, the ark, all lost. The second temple isn't Solomon's. It's simpler, smaller, more human, and yet, no less sacred. Historians would later say that the memory of the first temple haunted the second like a ghost. That it cast a long shadow of comparison. But you don't see a ghost. You see a seed, and it's growing. One night, not long after, a caravan arrives. Long, winding, tired, and different, because it's not just Judeans this time. It's Samaritans, some curious Arameans, a couple of grizzled traders from Tyre, and, most surprising of all, a man from Susa. A Persian, not an official, not a soldier, just a guy. He's heard of the temple. Says he wanted to see it. Why? Someone asks. He shrugs. Because it's being built. That's rare enough these days. He ends up hauling bricks by noon the next day. It's that kind of place now. You spend more and more evenings wandering through the city. Just watching. Kids play between scaffolding. Couples argue over where to hang laundry lines. There's a man who's taken it upon himself to sweep the entire temple courtyard with a palm frond broom every morning at dawn. Just because. The city isn't finished. Not even close. But it's breathing. And here's your quirky detail. Someone starts selling flatbread near the main gate. Calling it Cyrus cakes. No one knows why. They're just regular bread with sesame seeds. But they sell out by noon every day. You try one. It's fine. A little dry. But the name is comforting. Like a whispered memory. Like a thank you baked into dough. Still, not everything is light. You hear rumors. That Babylon hasn't quieted. That certain governors aren't thrilled with Darius's generosity toward foreign cults. That Jerusalem is growing into something more than a city, a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. The temple is almost done when the letters start arriving. From scholars, from scribes, from curious families miles away. Some want to help, some want to return, others ask questions. How should prayers be said now? What holidays are still valid? Do sacrifices still count if the altar is new? You listen as elders debate. Again. Always. Because this isn't just a rebuilding of stone. It's a rebuilding of identity. The rituals are old, but the people are new. And you're somewhere in between, covered in dust, clutching a half-filled waterskin. Still not sure if the temple smells more like cedar or burnt goat fat. But knowing something real is happening. And then, one evening, as you're helping lift the final stone into place atop the inner court, a sound stops you cold. A horn. Sharp, steady, familiar. You freeze. Because this isn't the horn of celebration. It's the horn of arrival. Someone important is here. And just as you wipe the sweat from your brow and squint into the setting sun, you see the silhouette of a rider approaching, flags trailing behind. Too fine for local officials. It seems the Empire hasn't forgotten you after all. The rider dismounts in a single, fluid motion, too graceful to be a courier, too casual to be military. His robe shimmers faintly in the late sun, the deep red of imperial messengers, stitched at the hem with gold thread. You spot the seal on his belt, a winged disc. Persian, high rank, and definitely not here for the sightseeing. He doesn't speak at first. Just surveys the scene, the nearly complete temple, the scaffolding, the workers pausing mid-hammer. He runs a hand along a freshly carved lintel, fingers tapping like he's counting years instead of inches. Then he turns. I come on behalf of King Darius. He says. No fanfare, no scroll, just that. You feel every pair of eyes in the courtyard fix on him. Even the birds seem to hush. The temple, he continues, is to be dedicated. A breath escapes you. You hadn't realized you were holding it. The dedication. The moment when the building stops being a construction site and becomes sacred space. When the stones, chipped, dragged, grumbled over, become something more. You'd always assumed that day would come quietly. A local ceremony, some chanting, maybe free bread, but no, this is different. This is imperial. This is official. This matters. The messenger stays for only one night, but it's enough to light every fire in the city. Preparations begin at dawn. Scribes rush to finalize prayer scrolls. Priests rehearse old songs like children cramming before an exam. Artisans polish every visible surface until even the cracked stones shine. You see someone trying to scrub soot off a burnt fig tree just in case it shows in the background. And through it all, the people come. Not just locals, not just returnees. Travelers from all across the Persian provinces arrive in slow, dusty waves. Judeans from Egypt, traders from Sidon, a group of musicians from Anatolia with instruments you can't name but want to touch. A cook from Ecbatana sets up a stew stand and sells out daily. The city buzzes like a festival caught in a thunderstorm, equal parts joy and nervous energy. You don't sleep much. You wouldn't want to. You might miss something. Then, the day arrives. Clear skies, no wind, a kind of stillness that makes your skin tingle. Like the earth is holding its breath. People crowd the temple court. Not packed, but close. The smell of incense swirls with goat sweat and crushed herbs. A low murmur pulses through the crowd, prayers, whispers, anticipation thick enough to taste. And then the trumpets sound. Not the cracked horns of the workers, but real ones, silver, imported, gleaming in the light. They ring out, high and sharp, and a hush falls. The priests emerge, robes clean, faces solemn. One carries the scroll of the law. Another holds a bowl of oil. A third carries a flame that's never been allowed to go out, not since Babylon. Not since the exile. They kept it alive, hidden, fed it in secret through the decades. You feel your throat tighten. Then the first song begins. It's old, ancient, one of the Psalms of Ascent. A melody meant for climbing steps, meant for carrying the soul upward. The crowd sings with it, soft and out of sync, like waves echoing back and forth across centuries. The priests chant, the oil is poured, the flame touches the altar, and the temple lives. It's not flashy. There are no lightning bolts, no doves descending, just the sound of thousands breathing in at once, then exhaling like they've been holding that breath since the day they left Babylon. You cry, not big sobs, just a slow leak you don't bother wiping away, because everyone else is crying. Too. Elders, children, that cook from Ecbatana, even the messenger, though he turns his face away. Afterward, there's food. Of course there's food. It's not perfect, too many cooks. Not enough bowls, but it's joyous. People share dishes without knowing names. A child from Sidon trades sesame cakes for figs. A priest's wife passes out mint leaves dipped in honey. Someone roasts a lamb near the north gate and declares it fit for heaven. You sit on a low stone, half full and fully overwhelmed, watching the temple glow in the setting sun. You think of the days before, of rubble and fear and letters lost in transit. And now you're here. And so is the scroll. Because tucked in the messenger's pack, revealed only at the feast, is the original edict, the one Cyrus wrote, the real one. It's shorter than you imagined. Just a few lines in cuneiform, pressed into clay, but the words, they hold weight. He calls himself the king of the four corners of the world. But he also calls himself chosen by the gods to return the exiles. That last part? You don't care if it was PR or politics. It worked. The scroll is placed inside the temple archives that night, beside the sacred vessels, not because it's divine, but because it helped restore the divine. And just as you think it can't get better, someone points to the eastern sky. The moon is rising, full and gold. A festival moon. And beneath it, people dance. Slowly, clumsily, joyfully. You lie back on a warm stone step. The air smells like oil and dust and roasted chickpeas. Your feet sting. Your back is wrecked. But your heart? Your heart is singing. And just as you drift toward sleep, lulled by tambourines and laughter, you hear a quiet voice behind you say, "Imagine what we could do next." Morning returns with soft light and louder chickens. Your neck creaks as you sit up, the stone step you used as a pillow having done no favors to your spine. Around you, the temple courtyard is a landscape of half-finished cleanup, overturned bowls, and sleeping pilgrims wrapped in cloaks that look suspiciously like tablecloths. The festival was real. You didn't dream it. The songs, the dedication, the way the crowd pressed in closer not just to see the altar but to feel something eternal, that happened. And now the return to daily life begins. Except today, something else is happening. Carts line the streets. Big, creaky ones, loaded with bowls of gold, basins, spoons, trays, incense burners that still carry the scent of Babylonian rituals, now being carried, carefully, into temple storerooms. There's a reverent sort of chaos to it, like watching moving day for sacred history. You help unload one of the carts. The wood groans under the weight of vessels, many of them older than your great-grandmother's memories. Some are dented, others are perfectly smooth. One, shaped like a lion's head, has a bite taken out of its lip from some forgotten siege. But they're here, returned, given back. Every piece tells a story. You catch one priest staring into a golden basin like it might show him visions of the first temple. He touches it once, then steps away, eyes shining. Here's a fringe detail you overhear from one of the older scribes. Some of these sacred vessels might not have come from Solomon's temple at all. They could be mixed in with loot from other conquests, Assyrian, Egyptian, Elamite. Nobody's quite sure, but no one's arguing. They've been purified, reclaimed, given new purpose, and maybe that's enough. You follow the procession as each object is catalogued. The scrollwork is intense. Every item receives a line in the temple records, often annotated with where it was found, what it once held, and who carried it on their back for half the desert. Some lists are written in Hebrew, others in Aramaic. One scribe jokes about needing a third arm just to keep up. You feel it again, that sensation of something sacred unfolding in slow motion. Not flashy, not loud, but real, like a dream you can walk through. The families gather near the gates to watch the final cart roll in. A hush falls again, not orchestrated, just natural. The people watch as the last few vessels are lifted out, bowls, menorahs, platters of hammered silver that still shimmer under layers of dust. No one claps, no one cheers. They just watch. And then, one of the elders begins to sing. Not a psalm this time. A song of remembrance. A melody worn smooth from years in exile. Others join, softly at first, then louder. You don't know all the words, but you hum anyway. The sound wraps around the courtyard like wind through cedar trees. Afterward, the people linger. They touch the stones of the temple. They trace the cracks in the old vessels. They light candles and tuck prayers into crevices. Some hold children up to see the sacred objects, introducing them to a legacy they barely understand, but will one day inherit. And then come the goodbyes. Because not everyone is staying. Some of the pilgrims are returning to Babylon, or to the other cities they now call home. They've paid tribute. They've seen the temple, but their lives are elsewhere now. You help tie down a crate on a departing cart. Inside is a parcel of leftover flour, wrapped carefully for a friend back in Sapar. The driver adjusts his belt, squints at the sun and says, "It's good. What you've done here." You nod, watching the dust rise behind him as he leaves. One family stands at the gate for a long time. The father is silent, hand resting on his son's shoulder. The boy asks, "Are we still exiles?" The man doesn't answer. He just looks at the temple, then down at his own feet, and whispers something you can't quite catch. You wander the city as the afternoon heat settles in like a thick blanket. The streets smell of ash and rosemary. Someone's baking again. Maybe Cyrus cakes. Maybe not. You see a group of kids playing with pebbles near the temple steps. Building little shrines. Their laughter bouncing off the stone. Back near the temple, an argument flares. Two elders debate whether one of the silver vessels should be used in daily ritual or preserved purely as artifact. The debate turns fiery, then comedic, then philosophical. A third elder interrupts by accidentally sneezing into a scroll. The moment dissolves into laughter. You leave them to it. There's a rhythm returning to life here. Not routine, not yet, but close. That evening, under a sky smeared with violet clouds, you sit outside the city walls. The temple behind you glows faintly, a golden outline against the darkening skyline. You're tired, you're sunburned, your hands are stained from carrying history. But your heart feels light. And just as you begin to drift off, head resting on your pack, a cool breeze stirs the dry grass and carries with it a voice from a nearby fire. Now that the temple stands, what comes next? You keep your eyes closed. But you smile, because that's the question of every age. The road eastward is dry, hot, and the color of old parchment. You're back on the move, this time with a small group of scribes, merchants, and wide-eyed pilgrims who somehow missed the dedication and are now determined to walk it off with some sacred tourism and possibly a few spices along the way. You're not headed into exile this time. You're retracing the exile's path in reverse, following the trail of those who returned to Jerusalem with their dreams bundled on carts and their faith stitched into their robes. The sun is brutal. It hangs like a polished bronze plate overhead, and even the goats look offended by it. But the mood is different from your last desert crossing. There's joy now, even among the sweat and sore feet. People sing, not just out of duty, but because they want to. Psalms echo across the hills, worn by time but still strangely melodic, like a song half remembered from childhood. You think about those who made this walk the first time, the ones dragging themselves out of Babylon, unsure if they were walking toward home or into another form of captivity. You walk past broken cartwheels and crumbled milestones, each one a ghostly reminder of that long, dusty gamble. And here's your quirky tidbit for the day. A few of the returning families actually brought instruments along, not lyres or flutes, but portable harps, disassembled and packed like flat-packed furniture, reassembled under stars at night to accompany psalms. You hear one being tuned during a rest stop. It's slightly out of tune and completely perfect. The young ones race ahead during the day, always scanning the horizon for Jerusalem's silhouette. Even though they're still days out, the older ones lag behind a little, sometimes sitting just to press a hand into the earth, as if trying to remember the soil, or maybe reintroduce themselves to it. One evening, as your group sets camp near a small wadi, a grandmother with a voice like gravel and molasses begins to chant an old song. Her words are cracked but powerful. You recognize fragments. It's a lament from exile, written when all hope seemed lost. But she sings it not with grief, but gratitude, as if by singing it here, in the open desert under starlight, it finally has a proper ending. And that's when it really hits you. The journey itself is part of the restoration. It's not just the destination. It's every dry mile, every blistered footstep, every whispered song shared between strangers who suddenly feel like family. The movement becomes sacred, the dust becomes holy. But it's not all metaphors and moonlight. You reach one of the border villages, the kind barely marked on maps, and the welcome is chilly. Suspicious eyes, closed shutters, a few whispers in languages you don't know. You try buying water at the well, but the merchant refuses silver, says it's temple coin, and he won't take it. The caravan leader tries to reason, explaining the temple's rebuilding, the king's permission, the peace that now exists. But the merchant only shrugs. That may be true in Jerusalem, he says, but this isn't Jerusalem. You sleep with one eye open that night. And there's your scholarly debate whether the returning exiles really integrated well with the populations who'd remained behind, or if tensions lingered like old embers. The records suggest both cooperation and resentment. It's complicated, like most things worth remembering. You're relieved to leave that village, but it sticks with you, this idea that even after freedom is granted, suspicion follows, that some walls don't crumble just because the stones are removed. A few days later, you crest a ridge and see something unexpected. Ruins, but not of Jerusalem. These are smaller. A village, maybe, a shrine, long abandoned. Some say it was once a Levite town, raised during the Babylonian invasion. Others claim it was a place of false worship, cursed and left to rot. Whatever it was, it's quiet now. You step carefully over fallen lintels and sun-bleached bones of timber. Wildflowers poke through the cracks. A single olive tree leans against the wind, stubborn and out of place. And then you notice the inscriptions. Barely visible on a broken column, faded Hebrew letters. A fragment of a psalm. Just a few lines, but enough. Someone was here. Someone sang. Someone believed. You sit for a while in the shade of the tree, listening to the wind whistle through empty spaces. It's not eerie, it's reverent, like the place is waiting for something, maybe for voices to return, maybe for forgiveness. That night, back at camp, a young scribe draws the village from memory onto a tablet. He wants to preserve it, not just as history, but as testimony, that even in destruction, there was devotion. That exile didn't erase everything. You fall asleep staring at the stars. They look the same as they did over Babylon, the same as they did over Jerusalem. And just as your eyes begin to blur with sleep, you hear one of the kids murmur from a nearby blanket. When we get there, do we bow? Or dance? You smile. Because yes, exactly that. Jerusalem smells like dust, sweat, and something new. You return just after dawn. The city still waking. Vendors lift canvas covers from carts. Roosters, who've somehow learned the exact frequency to pierce your skull, announce the morning. And beneath it all, you hear the sound of rebuilding continuing. Hammers, chisels, voices calling measurements, all humming in a rhythm that now feels like the city's heartbeat. The temple rises above it all, still modest, still unfinished in places, but standing. You stare up at its outline, the golden light catching just right on a beam of cedar. And for a moment you forget the weight in your shoulders. You forget the miles behind you. You made it back, and so has everyone else. The returners, those who left for Babylon or Sidon or Susa to spread the news, begin trickling back with fresh faces. Letters, tiny bundles of coin or cloth or wisdom. One even brings a chicken with feathers too clean to have crossed a desert honestly. The temple workers, those who stayed behind, keep building. They don't slow down. They can't, because now the dream is real. There's no turning back. You dive in again. The work is the same, rough stone, stubborn measurements, misdelivered timber, but you are different. You've seen the road from both ends now. You know the power of return, the ache of exile, and the astonishing quiet joy of planting something where once only ruins lay. One afternoon, you help unload new bricks from a cart and spot something strange, tiny marks carved into the side of one. You run your fingers across them. Not writing, exactly, just a symbol, a house, maybe, a sun, a name. You ask around. One of the workers shrugs. It's what his daughter draws on everything. He says, figured he'd sneak it in. You smile, because that's how rebuilding works, not just with measurements, but with memories, with fingerprints. And here's your quirky detail. Someone starts planting fig trees near the temple's outer court. At first, it's practical, shade and fruit. But soon it becomes symbolic. People bring cuttings from home, from Babylon, from Egypt. They call it the Grove of Return. You visit at dusk sometimes. Sit under the smallest tree. And watch it try to grow in cracked soil. It's stubborn. You admire that. Meanwhile, inside the city walls, a quieter rebuilding takes place. Houses, workshops, schools. You help repair the corner of a schoolhouse where the roof caved during last month's rain. Inside, children practice writing with reeds dipped in dye. One draws a lion, proudly declaring it the king of Persia. Another tries to copy a psalm and ends up inventing 3 new letters. The teacher sighs. You grin. It's not just structures being restored, it's life. Customs, traditions, morning rituals. Someone opens a bakery near the market square. And for a week they give away free bread to anyone who brings a stone for the foundation of their oven. Their logic? If you build it, you've earned it. You take 2 stones. And the bread's good, really good. But not everyone is cheering. One day, you notice a group gathered near the outer wall. Voices low, faces tight. You creep closer. It's a debate, not about measurements or materials, but about people. Who belongs here? Who should be allowed to serve in the temple? Whose lineage counts? Who's pure enough? You feel your stomach knot. These aren't strangers. These are returners. Too. But exile changes people, and not everyone returned with the same memories, or the same vision. A scribe stands up, quoting the old texts, voice sharp as a blade. A woman counters, reminding them that the exiles married, had children, built lives, that they can't be cast out now. Not after everything. Historians later call these identity debates. You just call them painful. Because it's hard to build unity when your history has been scattered like ash in the wind. Still, the argument cools. No decisions are made, just silence, reflection, and the slow realization that rebuilding doesn't just mean walls, it means redefining home. Later that evening, back in the grove, you see the woman from the argument sitting alone beneath the largest fig tree. She looks tired. You sit near her, not speaking, just breathing. The tree sways. A branch creaks. Somewhere nearby, a goat tries to climb a wall and fails with spectacular clumsiness. You both laugh. And that's the thing. You keep choosing togetherness. Even when the past tries to pull you apart. The next morning, a shipment arrives. Timber from Lebanon, tools from Susa, cloth from Tyre. The empire hasn't forgotten you. Maybe Darius knows this project matters. Or maybe one of those scribes wrote a really persuasive letter. Either way, the support continues. And the temple breathes a little easier. Just as you're hauling a bundle of cedar planks toward the new roof. Someone shouts from the tower. A message. You shield your eyes. The rider is small against the horizon. Galloping fast. Your hands ache. Your shoulders scream. But you drop the planks and run. Because in a city still learning how to live again, every message carries the weight of the world. The rider doesn't dismount at first, just circles near the temple gate like a buzzard trying to decide if it's safe to land. His cloak is road dust gray, and his face is hidden beneath a scarf that's collected half the desert. When he finally pulls it down, his beard is soaked with sweat, and his eyes look like they haven't blinked in 3 days. He doesn't carry a scroll. He carries a warning. You gather with the elders on the sun-baked steps, flanked by laborers still holding chisels and sawdust-smudged children peeking from behind columns. The rider clears his throat, spits dust, and says, "They're organizing." Silence. "You mean, the enemies?" someone asks. The rider nods. Samaritans, locals, some of the clans from Ammon. Word is, they've petitioned the imperial governors. They want the work halted. Again. You groan. So do a few others. Because you've been here before. The opposition doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears smiles. Sometimes it shows up at your gate with sweet figs and sour intent. And now, it's growing louder. This time, it's not just rumors. There are scrolls in circulation claiming the Judeans are fortifying a rebellion. That the temple is a military stronghold in disguise. That Jerusalem's walls are walls against Persia. A few local spies whisper that a bribe was passed in Ekron to delay timber deliveries. You feel your stomach twist. So far, none of these accusations have stuck. Darius's support has been firm. But support from faraway capitals is like water poured through a cracked jug. It doesn't always reach the thirsty. You meet that night beneath a canvas tarp stretched between two half-set columns. The city flickers in lantern light. The fig trees whisper. The elders pace. Some say wait. Others say retaliate. One says, "Why don't we just finish the temple already and dare them to stop us?" You sit in the corner, listening. Then it hits you. They don't need to stop the temple. They just need to make you stop. The sabotage grows smarter. Bricks go missing. Measurements are altered. Someone spreads word that the temple sacrifices are invalid without certain ancestral lineages, and suddenly half the priesthood is arguing over gene scrolls while the scaffolding sits untouched. One morning, a boy comes running from the wall. Graffiti, painted in thick black ink on a half-plastered wall of the temple's outer gate. You don't belong here. You scrub it yourself. Takes hours. The ink doesn't want to leave. Neither does the feeling. That night, the priests meet privately. The next day, you become a guard. Not a warrior. Not a soldier. Just a builder with a stick. You rotate shifts on the wall. You carry a tool in one hand, a spear in the other. The hammers ring by day. The watchers whistle by night. It feels like two cities now, one rebuilding, one defending. But both are tired. You feel it in your shoulders, in your breath, even in your prayers, which grow shorter, more urgent, less poetry, more pleas. And here's the quirky truth no one talks about. During this time, people start hiding their best tools in holes beneath their homes. Just in case, if the city is attacked, or worse, betrayed from within, they want to make sure they can rebuild again. Hope, packed in dirt. But then something unexpected happens. A letter arrives, not from the provinces, from the heart of Persia. Darius has reconfirmed the decree, with new detail, and added instructions. One of them? Local governors are ordered to provide material support for the temple's completion. You feel the shift like a warm breeze through cold stone. Suddenly, those friendly saboteurs go quiet. One even sends a sheep as a peace offering. It bites a priest's sandal. But hey, gesture appreciated. The supplies arrive in larger caravans now. The craftsmen return to their rhythm. Even the fig trees seem to perk up, as if leaning toward the sound of chisels and chanting. But you've learned your lesson. You build now with one eye always watching. And not just for enemies. Because some of the resistance isn't out there. It's in here. One of your own, a stonemason, gets caught altering measurements. He says he was just following a better plan. But the elders suspect a bribe. No punishment is declared, just quiet exile. His tools are left at the gate. You pick one up. It fits your hand too well. It's a reminder. That betrayal can wear familiar faces. Still, the temple nears completion. You place the final stone on the inner court steps. Your hands tremble, not from nerves, but from weight, because this isn't just a city anymore. It's a statement, a stand. And just as you begin to believe the worst is behind you, a runner arrives. Scribes from Babylon want to review the scrolls again. You blink. For what? To confirm whether the priesthood is properly documented. You don't even sigh. You just mutter under your breath and go find the genealogy records. Because welcome to rebuilding, where the mortar dries faster than the politics. You sit cross-legged on the temple's stone floor, your legs tingling from hours hunched over brittle scrolls. Around you, parchment stretches in every direction, genealogies, priestly records, temple laws, all laid out like a tangled net of names. Some of the ink is so faded you can only read it in slanted light. Some lines trail off mid-name. Some don't even agree on the number of generations between key figures. And you're the poor soul trying to untangle it before a delegation of scribes arrives to evaluate the legitimacy of your temple leadership. It's less dramatic than a siege, but in its own way, it's more maddening. You trace a single name down 5 generations, only to find a cousin appearing where a son should be. Another scroll insists one priest's grandfather came from Egypt, not Judea, and another is just a shopping list someone accidentally filed as scripture. You look up and sigh. One of the scribes nearby chuckles. Imagine if the enemy knew we were this disorganized. He says. You smirk. They wouldn't bother attacking. We'd collapse in committee. That's the thing. Right now, your defense isn't swords or stones, it's paperwork. The threat isn't soldiers, it's doubt. If the lineage of your priesthood can't be verified, some officials argue, the sacrifices are invalid. If the sacrifices are invalid, the temple's authority crumbles. So you get meticulous. You pull records from private homes, from cracked jars hidden behind lintels, from memory when the scrolls are too faded. One elderly woman recites 5 generations of priests in perfect order, then asks if anyone has figs. Another man insists he's a descendant of Aaron, but can't remember his grandfather's name. You nod politely and move along. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some families start wearing thread knots, colored cords tied to their sleeves, each one representing a branch of their lineage. Not just as decoration, but as silent declarations. I belong here. You wonder how many knots it would take to cover your own arm. Meanwhile, the construction hums on. The temple's frame is solid. The inner sanctum shines with imported cedar. The altar's bronze gleams under morning light. And yet, something feels fragile. Because this part of the process doesn't involve lifting stones. It involves defending identity. You're no longer just a builder. You're a witness. At night, you guard the archive chamber. The air smells like dried reeds and oil. You sit beside the clay tablets and folded parchment. Torchlight flickering over names. So many names. They rise and fall like waves on a scroll. Sons of sons. Fathers of exiles. Husbands of women you'll never meet. And here's where it gets emotional. You read a line that stops you cold. He who was born in the land of captivity, but dreamed of Jerusalem, shall be counted as native. No one knows who wrote it. It's scrawled in the margin of an older document, but it hits you in the chest like a prayer you didn't know you needed. Your throat tightens, because you've met these people. You are these people, born far from here, but belonging anyway. Still, not everyone agrees. When the Persian scribes arrive, they're polite but sharp-eyed. They wear robes of pale blue and gold, and they walk with the calm of men who know their ink holds more power than most swords. They spend hours reviewing documents, asking questions, raising eyebrows. They never smile. At one point, one of them, tall, thin, eyes like cracked ice, asks, "And who verifies the verifiers?" You blink. What? He gestures at the scrolls. These names, these records, they tell a story. But who decided this was the story to be told? You don't have an answer. Because honestly, you're still figuring that out. But you do your best. You gather the elders. You present the lineage of the high priest. You walk the scribes through the rituals, how the oil is poured, how the incense is measured, how the sacrifices are offered not with arrogance, but with trembling care. And slowly, their questions soften. One of them, a younger scribe, ink-stained fingers and a crooked smile, pulls you aside afterward. You know, he says, most provinces we visit are just surviving. This, he glances at the temple behind you. This is remembering. You nod. It's not a compliment. It's a truth. Before they leave, the head scribe makes a formal declaration. The records are sufficient. The priesthood stands. The rituals are authorized. It's not victory fireworks, but it matters. You return to the courtyard. The sunset hits the stone just right, turning everything gold. Workers gather for evening prayers. A mother lifts her daughter to let her touch the altar's edge. A few musicians play a halting psalm, off-key and too fast, but earnest. You sit beside the altar steps, legs stretched, back aching. You've hauled bricks, guarded scrolls, sorted bloodlines, and chased goats off the scaffolding more times than you can count. But tonight, you rest, because the temple isn't just standing, it's working. And just as your eyes begin to flutter close, a voice from behind murmurs, "There's talk of a new wall." You sigh. Of course there is. They don't call it paranoia, not yet. They call it preparedness. You're sipping from a chipped clay cup, lukewarm tea swirling against your teeth, when the first whisper comes. We need a wall. Not for show this time. For survival. At first, you think it's just chatter. Some elder remembering how the Babylonians smashed the last one to powder and thinking maybe, just maybe, this time you can be ready. But then a second voice echoes it. Then a third. Then a carpenter offers leftover wood for the gateposts, if needed. And a blacksmith starts hammering hinges without anyone even asking. It's like the idea spreads by osmosis, like rainwater soaking into dry earth. The temple may be finished, but the city isn't safe. Everyone knows it. The recent scroll checking, the scattered bribes, the whispers of returning enemies. It's like hearing footsteps in a dark corridor. You don't see anything yet, but you feel it. And now, everyone's looking for the man who might finish what others started. His name is Nehemiah. And here's your mainstream fact. Nehemiah served as cupbearer to King Artaxerxes I, a trusted courtier. The kind of man who could taste a king's wine and know if it was poisoned and political. He's not a soldier. He's not a prophet. But he has one thing that Jerusalem has desperately lacked: access. He also has, according to the fringe whisperings of temple gossip, a habit of pacing at night. And yes, historians still argue whether Nehemiah's appointment was purely political, a counterweight to the priests, or a genuine personal mission driven by grief for his homeland. But when he arrives, you don't expect him to look like this. He's younger than you imagined, eyes sharp, beard neatly trimmed, tunic clean but dusty from the road. He doesn't enter with trumpets. He enters with lists, and starts asking questions before he's even unpacked. He surveys the city walls in silence, mostly at dusk, when the shadows lengthen and the city takes on that bruised purple glow. You watch him climb a broken tower, touch the cracks in the stone, mutter under his breath. Then, one morning, he speaks. "Let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, so we will no longer be in disgrace." Disgrace. That word hangs in the air like smoke. It's not about glory. It's not even about safety. It's about dignity. So, here you go again. You trade out your temple tools for wall work gear. Hammers, trowels, picks. You already know the rhythm. One hand to build, one hand to guard. This time, Nehemiah takes a different approach. He divides the work, not just by trade, but by family. Each clan repairs the wall section nearest their own home. It's brilliant. People work harder when their children sleep beneath the stones they lay. Every strike of the hammer is personal. You even see a young boy tucking his grandfather's old bronze ring into the mortar. Like a blessing. You also hear more jokes than usual. Like, if the enemies break through this wall, they'll have to deal with my Aunt Rivka, and she's scarier than any army. Or, let them attack. I've been waiting for a reason to use my cousin's soup ladle as a mace. Nehemiah, for his part, doesn't hover. He moves fast, inspects daily, adjusts plans, and always watches the horizon. Because trouble's coming. Sanballat and Tobiah, names you've grown to hate like a pebble in your sandal, mock the work. First with letters, then with threats, then with spies. They claim the walls are a rebellion. That Nehemiah wants to crown himself king. That the Jews are plotting treason. The funny thing? The walls aren't even halfway done. And here's your sensory metaphor. The wall feels like a brittle crust around a still soft city. Like a scab forming over a wound that hasn't finished bleeding. But you keep working. The day heat is brutal. Your neck blisters under the sun. The stones burn your palms. Your knees pop with every crouch. You sleep in snatches. Guard shifts blur with work shifts. You start dreaming in bricks. One morning, someone finds a letter pinned to the gate with a crooked dagger. It says, simply, "We know what you're building. And we're watching." You don't say it aloud. But that's when you stop removing your work tunic at night. Nehemiah responds, not with threats, but with organization. Half the men work, half stand guard. You eat your meals with a spear propped beside your plate. Even when you go to draw water, you take a dagger tucked in your belt. And yet, the wall grows. You measure progress by hand widths now. By inches. The gaps narrow. The city begins to hold its shape. A line becomes a curve. A curve becomes a gate. You catch neighbors patting the stone like an old friend. Children running fingers along the new ridges like reading some secret message in the dust. Then, one night, Nehemiah calls a quiet gathering at the eastern edge. You expect a speech. Instead, he just walks the perimeter with a torch. Silently. You follow. So do others. A slow procession around the almost finished wall. The firelight throwing long shadows. No trumpets. No boasting. Just the sound of sandals scraping stone and wind brushing ash through the olive trees. It feels like a spell. Because this isn't just a wall. It's the edge of something new. And just as the first stars peek out overhead, you hear Nehemiah murmur something. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a promise. You don't ask what. Because you know what he means. The last stone settles with a soft thud. You don't cheer. No one does. It's not that kind of moment. You just stand there, palm pressed flat against the cool, finished wall, and feel something shift, not in the stone, but in your chest, like you've closed a circle. Like, finally, after decades of drifting, of building, of defending and doubting, you are inside something. That same scratchy tunic hangs looser now. You've lost weight from the labor. Your hands are rough. Your back aches. But your steps? They feel lighter. Because Jerusalem has walls again. They're not massive. Not imperial. They don't sparkle with gems or dazzle ambassadors. But they're real. They hold. They mean something. People begin to sleep deeper. You hear fewer screams at night. The gates creak open at sunrise. And for once, you don't flinch. And that's when the reading begins. It starts simply. Ezra, the same scribe who once wept over broken stone, gathers the people. Not just the builders. Everyone. Families pour into the square. Old men with furrowed brows. Young children blinking in the sun. Women balancing babies on hips. Even the skeptical merchants, who once mocked your wall building, now lean in from the rooftops. A wooden platform has been built. Nothing fancy, but it lifts Ezra high enough that his voice carries. He opens a scroll, and just like that, everything quiets. The air itself seems to hush, like it's holding its breath. He reads from the Torah. And here's your mainstream fact. This public reading of the law, recorded in the book of Nehemiah, marks one of the earliest, most definitive moments of a post-exilic Jewish identity forming around scripture rather than temple or territory. But the mood? It's electric and strangely intimate. The sun crawls higher as Ezra speaks. The scroll rustles like leaves in wind. People murmur, "Amen," as if waking from a long dream. Others weep, gently, silently, tears dripping onto dusty sandals. You feel one trail down your own cheek, and you don't wipe it away. Because the words aren't just laws. They're reminders of who you are, of who you were always meant to be. Not prisoners, not wanderers, but a people. And here's your fringe tidbit. Legend says some of the older folks in the crowd fainted, not from heat, but from shock, because they never thought they'd live to hear the Torah in Jerusalem again. Ezra pauses, his voice hoarse. This day is holy, he says. Do not mourn or weep. And then Nehemiah, always practical, always watching the crowd like a shepherd scanning for wolves, adds with a half smile, go eat rich food. Drink sweet wine. Share with those who have none. There's laughter, soft at first, then bubbling up like water from a dry well. People begin to scatter, talking, hugging, debating the scroll's finer points. But you stay, just for a moment, letting the words echo inside you like a song remembered from childhood. Later that night, you eat with neighbors beneath the olive trees. The food isn't fancy, stew, bread, a sip of wine, but it tastes like a feast. The stars above seem closer. The air smells of thyme and wood smoke. And someone brings up Sukkot, the festival of booths. The memory of wandering, of God's provision in the wilderness. You all look at each other, then laugh. Because why not? The next morning, branches are gathered, makeshift shelters pop up on every rooftop, in every courtyard, like tiny huts stitched from memory. It looks absurd. It looks perfect. Families eat beneath them, tell stories, share songs. Children chase each other through the gaps, squealing with glee. And for the first time in a long time, the joy feels unburdened. It's not that the pain is gone. It never really is. But it's quieter now, set down for a while. Ezra continues reading each day. People come faithfully. Some bring notes. Others bring questions. One man writes down every single name he hears, claiming he's building a master scroll for future generations. So they'll know, he says, that we remembered. Scholars still debate whether this gathering marked a pivot in Jewish culture, from temple-centered to text-centered. Whether it planted the seed of rabbinic tradition. But for you, standing in the soft shadow of that rebuilt gate, it's something simpler. It's the sound of your language, in your city, among your people, and it's enough. As the days pass, you notice something small, but profound. The guards at the gate begin to smile. It's not flashy, not wide, just a curve of the mouth when someone passes with figs. Or a quiet, shalom, when kids wave. It's the beginning of trust. One evening, as you walk the wall, old habits die hard. You stop at the northern edge. The wind is cool. The stones are solid beneath your palms. You stare out into the hills. No armies. No torches. Just the faint flicker of distant campfires, shepherds. Maybe, travelers. And inside the city? The low hum of music. The scratch of pen on parchment. The laughter of a boy who doesn't yet know what exile means. You close your eyes and breathe deep. That same sour smell of the old chamber pots? It's still around, but it's fainter now. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough for tonight. The festival ends. The scrolls are rolled and tied again. The sukkahs taken down, branches bundled and burned. Laughter trailing off like candle smoke. But something lingers in the streets. Not the joy. Exactly. Not even the reverence. It's focus. The kind that comes after catharsis. You stretch your shoulders in the early morning air. The wall stands quiet behind you. The gates still creaking open like old knees. The smell of last night's embers hangs in your tunic. And as your fingers brush the brickwork, you wonder, what now? You're not alone in that question. Because the Persian world, that massive engine of policy and plunder, is still humming. And your little walled sanctuary, for all its holiness, still sits squarely beneath the heel of imperial bureaucracy. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Darius, the first successor of Artaxerxes, introduces a sweeping economic system across the empire, standardized weights, a royal road network, and most notably, the derrick, a gold coin stamped with the image of the king, armed with bow and arrow. And yes, that coin starts to show up even here. slipping between market hands, jingling in the corners of prayer shawls. It's beautiful, heavy, gleaming, and it says something without words. You may have a wall, a scroll, and a god, but you still belong to the empire. That's where the debates begin. Do you use the coin? Or reject it? Buy land with it? Pay wages? Or does it tarnish the very fabric you've just restored? You, for your part, keep it hidden, tucked in a scrap of cloth behind the lintel stone in your home. Just one derrick, not because it's valuable, but because it's strange, foreign, and you're not sure what it means yet. You're not the only one puzzled. The priests argue late into the night. Some say the temple should only accept shekels of Hebrew origin. Others say that's impossible if you want cedar from Lebanon or wheat from Egypt. Then, like a stone dropped into still water, rumors ripple outward. In Babylon, they say, strange altars have sprung up. Not for Marduk, not for Ishtar, but for Yahweh. Exiles who never came back, now praying eastward. Not toward the ziggurat but toward the holy city they've never seen. Some say it's devotion. Others say it's heresy. Here's your fringe tidbit. A few Babylonian Jews, caught between faith and empire, carve Yahweh's name into amulets and wear them inside hollowed-out idols, just in case. And no one can agree if that's worship or insurance. Ezra frowns more often now. His beard is streaked with gray. He scribbles by lamplight, checking laws, cross-referencing scrolls. Nehemiah too seems restless. He walks the walls at odd hours again. The city feels caught in a long exhale. And you? You feel it in your back, your knees, your temples. That same dull pressure you felt back in Babylon, of waiting for the next shoe to drop. Then, a new rumor arrives. Whispers of Egyptian unrest, rebellion in the Nile satrapy, and Persian messengers, thin men on fast horses, start streaking through Jerusalem without even slowing to drink. Change is coming, but not all at once. It begins with coin and ends with ritual. You notice more and more people debating what counts as clean. Whose marriages are legitimate? Who is really descended from the returnees? Ezra, once a scribe, now feels like a judge. The law, once a comfort, now looms like a fence. It's not malicious. It's survival, a way to protect what's been rebuilt. But it also tightens, slowly, around your chest. Historians still debate whether this period marks the solidification of Jewish identity, or its first real internal fracturing. Because unity born of exile is powerful. But unity born of gatekeeping? It stings. You feel it when a merchant's wife is told she must leave her husband, he's too foreign. His lineage unclear. You feel it when a boy is denied entrance to the temple because no one can verify his mother's ancestry. You even feel it when Ezra, tired and hoarse, mutters that dreaded phrase again. This day is holy. Do not mourn. Because you do mourn. Not just the past, but the growing gaps inside the present. Still, life continues. Market stalls open. Pottery clinks. Children chase chickens. And those coins? You begin to use them. Carefully. Respectfully. You buy a new blanket with your hidden derrick. It's coarse, but warm, dyed the color of mulberries. And that night, as you wrap yourself in it and lay down beside the wall you helped build, you hear the faintest sound in the distance. Hoofbeats. Not many, just one or two. Riders coming from the north. Maybe a messenger, maybe a traveler. But you know the rhythm. The way news arrives like a pebble in your shoe. Uninvited, persistent, impossible to ignore. You shift under your blanket. The wall presses behind you like a spine of quiet stone. And just as you start to rest, another trouble begins. The riders are lean, their horses foamed at the neck. Scroll cases bouncing against saddlebags as they thunder through the lower gate. One stops to drink, barely a sip, before disappearing into the courtyard beyond the temple. The other, you swear he stares right at you. And just like that, you're up on your sore feet again. That same sense of dread, Like when you were a child and the wind picked up in a way that meant your tent might not survive the night, tightens your gut. You follow the whispers as they rise through the city like smoke. There's news from Susa. Darius is dead. Now it's his son, Xerxes. That name already feels heavier in your mouth. Sharper. Like a blade edge wrapped in silk. No one knows much yet. But rumor paints him both brilliant and terrifying. One merchant swears he's taller than any man alive. Another claims he personally choked a rebel satrap to death for interrupting a feast. And somewhere in that swirl of myth and fear, your old unease returns. Because empires with new rulers are like children with fire. You never know what they'll burn first. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Xerxes I succeeds Darius in 486 BCE and, unlike his father, focuses less on diplomacy and more on raw power, launching massive campaigns, including the infamous invasion of Greece. And while his armies march westward, his scribes tighten eastward. That means new taxes, new oaths, new inspections of temple operations. Jerusalem, still small and fragile, is told to prepare a census. Nehemiah is furious. You see it in his eyes, that glint of the old courtier. The one who used to serve with wine in one hand and a dagger always hidden near the wrist. Ezra looks worried too. He's back to his scrolls. But this time, he's not copying. He's editing. They're both trying to protect something, though neither says it aloud. The census comes fast. Dry-eyed bureaucrats descend with their ledgers and little cubes of ink. They knock on doors, measure fields, weigh grain, and yes, they ask for names, not just of the living, but the dead. They want records of lineage. And for the first time, you see what it means to be uncounted. Here's your fringe tidbit. One family, unable to prove their tribal origin, carves their genealogy into a clay tablet and buries it beneath the threshold, hoping future generations might one day find it and claim their place. It breaks your heart a little, because that could have been you. The questions begin to wear on people. Who's truly a returnee? Who belongs? What if your mother was foreign? What if your father died before you could learn your clan? You feel it when you walk into the marketplace and a man you've known for years is suddenly called unclean. His stall? Empty. His goods? Spoiled by silence. It's not an edict, not yet, but it spreads like mold. Historians still debate whether this moment sowed the seeds of later sects, the ones who would argue over every law, every nuance, until love and law no longer fit in the same tent. And you try to stay out of it. But it's hard. You're stopped one afternoon on your way to the temple. Two young men, nervous, wearing priestly tunics that still smell of new dye. Your name? One asks. You tell him. He frowns. Your father was. You pause. Because you know the answer. But you also know what happened to his name in the old records, scratched, faded, unverified. So you say it softly, like offering an old coin that might not be accepted. They nod. One makes a mark. The other hesitates. Are you sure you're of Israel? You stare at him. You could list the bricks you laid, the hours spent carrying scrolls, lifting beams, praying by firelight. You could show him your hands, scarred from wall work, burned from hearts. You could take him to the southern gate, point to a stone, and say, "That one? That was mine." But instead, you just nod once. I'm sure. He doesn't smile, just marks something. Then they move on. That night, under a sky of brittle stars, you sit with a few others who weren't sure enough. One jokes, "Maybe we should start our own tribe. Call it doubt." You all laugh, but there's sadness in it. Because in a city rebuilt from exile, even belonging can feel like borrowed clothing. You find yourself walking the wall again, your old habit, like scratching an old scar. The stone is warm. The city below you glows faintly with oil lamps and cooking fires. And suddenly, you hear it, the low hum of a voice. Ezra, reading aloud again, not for a crowd this time. Just himself, maybe, or God, or whoever listens to late-night scribes who've lost track of which rules bind and which ones break. The wind picks up, carries the words, you catch only fragments, and you shall remember that you were a stranger. The words curl around your ears like warm smoke. Because that's the one truth that seems to hold through every census. Every empire, every stone and scroll and whisper. You were a stranger, and maybe you always will be. But somehow, you are also here, and maybe that's enough. Just as you begin to drift, knees aching, heart soft, you hear a new name whispered near the gate. A name you've never heard before. And it's coming. The name drifts through the city like fog. Soft at first, half misheard. Malachi? Malachi? Wasn't he the one who fixed the courtyard gate? But no, not a mason, not a merchant, not even a priest. A prophet, of course. Because when politics tightens its grip, and scrolls start to splinter instead of bind, what you need isn't another decree or census or ledger. What you need is someone willing to say the quiet part out loud. And that's Malachi. No one knows much about him. Really, he's not a robe and staff type. More the kind to show up uninvited, speak plainly, and disappear before you can argue. His words? Short, sharp, more wind than thunder. You first hear them on a street corner. Passed from mouth to ear like contraband. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Malachi is considered the final prophet of the Hebrew Bible. Living somewhere around the mid-5th century BCE, after the temple is rebuilt. But before silence settles in for centuries. And his message? A slow burn. He doesn't condemn like Isaiah, or weep like Jeremiah. He just asks questions, annoying ones, real ones, like, where's your honor? Priest? Why do you cheat each other in the market? Why bring sick lambs as offerings when you'd never serve that to a governor? He points at the rot under the fresh paint. And for once, you feel seen. Because yes, the temple's rebuilt, but the hearts inside it? Still a mess. You remember one of his stranger lines. You've wearied the Lord with your words. And it hits you harder than the old fire and brimstone stuff. Because it means even God can get tired of excuses. Even divinity, apparently, sighs. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some say Malachi wasn't a man at all. That Mal-Aki just means, my messenger. And the prophet was anonymous by design. A voice without a face. A mirror held up to a people tired of pretending. The debate still rages. Scholars argue if he was Ezra in disguise. Or a lesser priest with a knack for poetry. Or maybe a nobody. Just a guy who listened too hard and couldn't stay quiet anymore. You kind of hope it's the last one. Because that makes him your kind of prophet. One evening, you sit by the eastern gate, watching as children chase a goat down the alley. The air smells like oil, warm bread, and something less pleasant, maybe a burst wineskin or an overturned chamber pot. The city's alive, messy, real. And just over the hum of it all, you hear someone recite Malachi's words. Behold, I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. It sends a shiver up your spine. Not fear, not even reverence, just a quiet recognition. Because in a place where kings forget, scrolls fade, and lines blur between pure and impure, sometimes the only thing left is the voice. And Malachi's voice is like flint. It sparks something. Nehemiah hears it too. You can tell by the way he walks. Less urgency. More intention. He's older now. Beard silver at the edges. Voice softer but steadier. One night, he calls a gathering. Not an edict. Not a feast. Just a conversation. You all sit in the courtyard. Knees creaking. Tunics dusty. Some kids perched on stone ledges, swinging their legs like birds. And Nehemiah says something simple. Maybe it's not about perfect worship. Maybe it's just about honesty. The silence that follows is gentle. You reach into your pouch and rub the edge of a derrick coin. Still there after all this time. Gold glinting faintly, a reminder of the Empire's reach, and your own entanglements. You think of the offerings, the festivals, the dividing lines, and the voice of Malachi, now echoing in your head more than your ears. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And maybe that's the point. Not judgment, not punishment, but refinement. The fire doesn't come to burn you. It comes to clarify. That night, you light a small lamp in your home. Not for prayer, not for ritual, just to sit beside it, and let the light warm your hands. Outside, the city hums with distant sounds, singing, arguing, laughing, mourning, and you breathe, in, out. Your knees ache, your back cracks when you stretch. Your old scratchy tunic still doesn't sit right across your shoulder blades. But your heart feels a little quieter. The wall still stands. The temple still glows. The name of the Lord is still whispered under breath in alleyways and sung aloud on rooftops. And somewhere, out beyond the city, the messenger walks. A voice in the dusk. A spark in the ash. And just as your eyes begin to close, the breeze picks up, carrying with it one final whisper of prophecy. You wake to bells. Not temple bells, those are slow. Ceremonial. These are sharper, quicker, bouncing off the stone like startled birds. Alarm bells. A sound you haven't heard in years. You sit up, knees stiff. That familiar pop in your lower back greeting the morning before your eyes even focus. Something's wrong. You tug on your robe, still half asleep, and move through the courtyard. People murmur. Some are climbing onto rooftops. Others just stare east, toward the outer gate, where a dust cloud spins lazily into the sky. But there's no army coming. No horses. No banners. Just confusion. By midday, a messenger confirms it. Someone's claimed to be the rightful high priest. Not just claimed, taken it. A man named Joshua, but not the one you knew. This Joshua has lineage, yes, but not the trust of the people. He was installed in the night. Quietly. The elders weren't consulted. The priesthood is split. And suddenly, the temple is contested. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The post-exilic period saw major tensions between priestly factions, especially between those of Zadokite descent and newer, politically backed claimants. This laid groundwork for sects that later emerged, including the Sadducees and Pharisees. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some say the new high priest bribed his way into power using Persian coin, gifted by a governor looking to control religious influence without appearing to interfere. But in the moment, none of that matters. What you see is Ezra's face. Blank, eyes unfocused, like someone just knocked the wind from his chest. Nehemiah? Gone. Vanished from the city a week ago on business in Susa. No one knows when he'll return. Or if. You feel it again. That sour twist in your stomach. Like when the wind shifts just before a sandstorm. Inside the temple, there's shouting. Not loud. Hushed. The dangerous kind. You edge closer. Just enough to catch pieces. Illegitimate. Without Urim and Thummim. He never passed through purification. But louder than all of it is a single line, repeated again and again by a younger priest. The altar must remain lit. And so it does, even if the men who tend it now feel like strangers. That night, you retreat to your rooftop. Same stone, same stars, same breeze tickling the curtains and carrying the scent of warm oil and tired goats. But something's different. It's that old feeling, like the rug's been tugged out from under you. But somehow you're still standing. Because Jerusalem isn't falling. It's shifting. Again. And it hurts. Because after everything, the exile, the return, the scrolls, the walls, the second chances, it turns out people are still people. Petty, proud, easily bought, easily frightened. You pull your shawl tighter. Not against cold, but against memory. The kind that scrapes. You think of Malachi's words again. Will a man rob God? Maybe he meant more than coins and offerings. Maybe he meant this quiet theft of trust, of sacredness, of the thing you can't quite name but feel hollow without. Scholars still debate whether this was the beginning of organized religious politics in the region, whether the rot set in now or had simply been waiting under the surface. Biding its time, you think about the people, the shopkeepers, the stonecutters, the women who weave shawls with hands like cracked pottery, the kids who chase each other around the outer pillars. They still need something to believe in. And maybe that's what you are now. Not a priest, not a builder, just a keeper of memory, of intention, of a gentler fire. So the next morning, you do something small. You sweep the temple steps. Slowly, deliberately, letting the dust rise, then settle, letting the sun warm your face. Not for praise, not even for order, just because it should be done. A young boy joins you, broom in hand, doesn't ask why, just starts brushing. Then another, and another. By mid-morning, the steps are clean, not polished, not perfect, just tended, and in some quiet, strange way, it feels like a prayer. No words, no incense, just movement, breath, presence. And just as you start to gather your things, your hands stiff from the broom's rough handle, a new sound rises from the courtyard. A song, untrained, off-key, glorious. It's an old psalm, one you haven't heard in years. About return, about mercy, about not being forgotten. You sit back down on the steps, tunic damp with sweat, and let the notes wash over you. Because even now, even in the noise, the doubt, the petty grabs for power, the song still sings, and so do you. The sun dips low, and for once, the evening arrives quietly. No alarms, no shouting matches echoing from the temple court. Just that warm, pink hush as Jerusalem exhales into twilight. You sit by the southern wall, watching shadows stretch like long fingers across the limestone. The city looks softer in this light, less like a battleground, more like a bedtime story. You rest your elbows on your knees. Your old tunic clings to your back, still damp from the day's heat. Every joint feels like it's wrapped in burlap. Not painful, just aware. A quiet stiffness, like your bones have memorized too many prayers. But your mind feels light. Because this time, no one's asking for your attention. No governor, no priest, not even your conscience. For once, it's just you, and the sound of children's laughter drifting up from the market road below. And that's when it hits you. It's over. Not in the wrapped up nicely with a bow kind of way, but in the sense that a chapter has closed. The temple is complete. The altar burns steady. The people, fractured and fiery as they can be, have returned. Not just their bodies, not just their scrolls, but something deeper. Their rhythm, their remembering. Your breath slows. Here's the historical truth. After Malachi, the prophets fall silent for nearly 400 years. No new scrolls, no voices in the wilderness. Just history chugging along, slow and unspectacular, building toward another empire, another Messiah, another dream. But in this quiet pause, something sacred settles. A new generation begins asking questions not about walls, but about ways. Not just who leads the temple, but why it matters. It's the start of deeper thought, oral traditions, schools of commentary, the seeds of what would become rabbinic Judaism. It begins with memory, and you're part of that. You may not be in the scrolls, no name etched into gold, no miracles to your credit, but you were here. You carried stone, you scraped paint, you held the line when others dropped it. You kept showing up, and now, as you lie back and let the stone cool your spine, you feel it. Not pride, not relief, just peace. The kind that comes not from finishing something perfectly, but from knowing you gave it everything. Nearby, someone lights a lantern. Its glow paints a flickering halo on the courtyard walls. In the distance, a low chant begins, nothing formal. Just an old hymn hummed by tired voices who still believe. You hum along, without meaning to. A breeze nudges your hair. A fig drops from a nearby tree, lands soft beside your hand. And that same thought comes back again. The temple stands. The people endure. The fire never went out. You smile. Because sometimes, that's enough. And now, as the night truly settles in, you find yourself stretched out in the familiar quiet of your own space. The air is still, wrapped in that linen hush that only comes when the world has done enough for one day. Your shoulders soften. Your breath grows longer, slower. The stone beneath you? It's no longer a battleground. It's just ground, earth, cool and calm. The sounds of the city are hushed now, only the occasional creak of a door. A distant bleat from a goat finding its sleep, or the soft crunch of sandals on dry path. Even those sounds feel far away, like echoes from another time. A time that has passed. A time you lived through. A time you helped shape. And the fire, yes, the one inside the temple, still burns. Faint, steady, golden. A flickering whisper that says, we're still here. You let that image stay in your mind. The warm stone, the humming voices, the scent of fig and olive and sun-baked dust, the soft thrum of breath in your chest, like the city breathing through you. You did enough. You are enough. And tonight, there's nothing more to fix. No scrolls to fetch. No enemies at the gate. No missing bricks to chase. Just rest. So let your hands fall still. Let your eyes drift closed. Let the last glow of Jerusalem settle into your thoughts like candlelight behind your eyelids. The temple stands. The people endure. And the story? It can sleep too.